I recognized his name in the second week, not from having met him before, not from a face I remembered. From a newspaper. The crime column of the Dodge City Weekly Register, page 2, printed 18 months before he arrived in Grover, Wyoming. His name, a description that matched the charges, robbery and the death of a man during the commission of it. I had read that article on a Tuesday afternoon in the county library at the county seat, waiting for a shipment of school books that arrived late. And I had read it the way I read everything, cover to cover, including the advertisements and the obituaries, and the notices that most people skip. I had almost forgotten it. Almost. The name had sat somewhere in the back of my mind the way some things sit when you've filed them without knowing they would matter later. And then Cole Aldridge came to work at the Hart Ranch 2 miles north of Grover. And someone said his name at the general store on a Monday morning. And the file opened. I spent 3 more weeks deciding what to do about it. My name is Ruth Caswell. I have been the school teacher in Grover since the spring of 1878, when I came west from Columbus, Ohio on the Union Pacific, and then by stage to this particular corner of Wyoming Territory. The people of Grover who had opinions about this, and there were several, had opinions about why a woman of 28 with a teaching certificate and a full set of books would leave Ohio for a 1-room schoolhouse on the Wyoming plain. They were variously wrong. I came because the position paid $35 a month and provided a room with the Hartley family, and because the advertisement had said 16 students, which was a number I could manage, and because something in me had needed to go somewhere that was not Columbus, Ohio, which is a reason I did not put in my application, and which was the whole of the reason. Grover was a town of about 200 people in 1879, which in Wyoming Territory counted as a settled community. It had a general store, a livery, a doctor who also pulled teeth, a small church, and the 1-room schoolhouse I presided over with 16 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. The children were, for the most part, serious about their education in the way that children are serious when they understand that education is not decorative but functional. When you live 40 miles from the nearest city and can barely read, the arithmetic of survival is different than it is when you have other options. I had been in Grover for 13 months when Cole Aldridge arrived. He was one of 4 men the Hart Ranch took on for the spring and summer work, mending fence, managing cattle rotation, the particular labor of the season that required hands the year-round crew couldn't cover. He came into town with the other 3 on a Saturday, bought what he needed at the general store, and left without any particular impression except that he was quiet in a way that was not sullen, but was sustained, and that he held his hat when he came into rooms. The name, Aldridge, Coleman Aldridge, which was what the Dodge City Weekly Register had printed 18 months before, in a crime column I had read, between the seed advertisements and the obituaries, on a slow Tuesday afternoon while waiting for school books that arrived an hour late. I am aware that this sounds like a specific thing to remember, but I read the way other people breathe, without particularly deciding to, and without being able to stop. Every word of every page. It is not a skill I cultivated. It is something closer to a condition, and it has resulted over the years in my carrying a great deal of information I did not ask for and cannot reliably discard. The Dodge City crime column had lodged because the description was vivid gray-eyed, dark-haired, lean, with rope calluses and a scar on the right hand. And because the charge was specific and the man's name was unusual enough to stick, the name Aldridge, Coleman Aldridge, which was what the Dodge City Weekly Register had printed 18 months before the man I was now looking at had arrived in Grover. The man standing at the store counter had said his name was Cole, which could be a shortened version or a different name entirely. And his face was weathered in the way that many men's faces were weathered. And I had read a newspaper column from a year and a half ago and could not be certain I was not simply matching the pattern of the name to the pattern of a man who happened to resemble a dot, so I did the thing I always do when I am uncertain. I went to the library. The county library at the seat kept back issues of 6 regional papers, including the Dodge City Weekly Register, which they received irregularly but maintained. On the second Saturday after Cole Aldridge arrived in Grover, I rode the 12 miles to the county seat and spent 2 hours in the back room with the bound issues. The original article was on page 2, exactly as I remembered it. Coleman Aldridge, 30 years old at the time of printing. Dark-haired, gray-eyed, wanted in connection with the robbery of the Calhoun freight office and the death of a night watchman during the commission of said robbery. The name matched. The description matched closely enough to account for 2 years of outdoor work. I sat with that for a moment. Then I kept reading. Because I always kept reading. 8 months after the original article, on page 3 of the same paper, there was a notice. 4 lines. Coleman Aldridge, charged in the Calhoun freight robbery, had been acquitted on the grounds of insufficient evidence and misidentification. A second man, one Henry Pruitt of Lawrence, Kansas, had subsequently confessed to the crime and been convicted. The charges against Aldridge were dismissed entirely. 4 lines. Page 3. The kind of notice that appears when a paper is required to correct itself and prefers to do so as quietly as possible. I sat in the county library for a long time, 3 years. Cole Aldridge, because I was now certain enough to call him that, had been running for approximately 3 years, moving from Kansas to Nebraska to Colorado and now to Wyoming, working ranges under his first name or close variants of it, staying no longer than a season, never putting down anything that could be pulled up. And the reason he was running had been removed from under him 8 months after he started. In 4 lines on page 3 of a Kansas weekly that he had almost certainly never read, I wrote the notice out by hand, word for word, on a piece of paper from my satchel. I folded it. I rode home. The question of what to do with it occupied me for the next 2 weeks. The difficulty was this: a man who has been running for 3 years has good reasons to run from anyone who knows his name. If I approached him wrong, if he thought I was threatening him, or that I intended to report him, or that I knew something that made him a danger to me, he would be gone from Grover within the hour, and I would have accomplished nothing except making his situation worse. And if he ran, he would keep running past Wyoming, into Montana or Idaho or somewhere the newspapers arrived even less reliably. And he would carry the weight of the acquittal he didn't know about for the rest of his life. I needed to approach him in a way that made him stay long enough to hear the thing I needed to say. And I could not think of a way to do that which was not, at its core, a deception, which was something I was not practiced at and did not particularly want to learn. What I was practiced at was books and the school. and the particular bureaucratic requirement of October, which was the county education officer's annual inspection of the schoolhouse facilities, which required a written report of any structural needs, which I had been meaning to address for 2 weeks, and which the broken window on the north wall of the schoolroom required me to address immediately. I sent word to the Hart Ranch that the schoolhouse needed some carpentry work and that I would pay fair wages to anyone with the skills and the time. The foreman sent Cole. He arrived on a Tuesday morning with tools in a canvas bag and the manner of a man who has been told what the job is and requires no further conversation about it. He tied his horse at the post outside and came through the schoolroom door during my reading lesson, and my 16 students looked at him and then at me, and I said, "This is Mr. Cole. He is here to repair the north window," and they looked at him for another moment and then went back to their readers, which was the right response and which I was grateful for. I watched him work for the first hour from the corner of my vision, the way a teacher watches a room, peripherally, without fixing on any one thing. He moved efficiently. He measured before he cut. He checked his work twice. He did not look around the room to see who was watching him. In my experience, men who are hiding something look around rooms frequently. Cole Aldridge did not look around at all. At noon, I sent the children outside and I made coffee the way I always did, on the small iron stove in the back corner, and I poured 2 cups the way I had poured 2 cups for the last 2 men who had done work in this building, because that was what you did, and because I needed to stand near him. He arrived on a Tuesday morning, which was what I had hoped for and what I had not allowed myself to plan for too precisely, because planning precise things about a man you have been thinking about for 2 weeks is not the same as acting on a useful impulse. He came with tools and with the look of a man who has been told what the job is and intends to do it and nothing more. I showed him the window. He looked at it, looked at the sill, looked at the frame, and told me what it needed. He did not look at me for longer than the conversation required, which I noted and understood. He had spent 3 years being careful about being looked at. The natural result was a man who was also very careful about looking. He worked on the window and I taught my morning lessons, and at noon I made coffee the tendu way I always did and brought him a cup the way I had brought the last 2 men who worked on this building a cup. Because it was what you did, and because I needed to stand near him long enough to say the thing I had to say, I handed him the cup. He took it. He said, "Thank you." "Ma'am," I said, "your name is Coleman Aldridge." He went completely still, not the stillness of a man who is about to deny something, the stillness of a man who has been waiting for a specific thing to happen for 3 years and is calculating, in the space of a single breath, what his options are. He put the coffee cup down on the windowsill. His hands were very steady. He said, "I think there's been a mistake." I said, "I think you've been making one. Please sit down." He did not sit down. He looked at me with those gray eyes that took their time, and I understood that. I had approximately 30 seconds before his legs made the decision his mind was still working on. I said, "I read the original article." And I read the notice that came 8 months later. Something moved across his face that I did not have a name for yet. I said, "Henry Pruitt of Lawrence confessed." The charges against you were dismissed. You were acquitted, Mr. Aldridge. He stood at the north window of the Grover schoolhouse for a long time. The morning light came through the broken pane we had been working on. Outside, through the gap, the Wyoming plain stretched away in the November cold, wide and indifferent. He said very quietly, "What notice?" I reached into my satchel. I took out the folded paper and held it out to him. He did not take it immediately. He looked at it in my hand the way you look at something that might or might not be real. When you have learned not to trust the things that look like what you need. Then he took it. He unfolded it. He read it. He read it 3 times. I counted because there was nothing else to do, and because I had learned that counting is useful when you are trying not to say something into a silence that needs to remain a silence. When he finally looked up, his eyes were dry. Whatever was happening in him was happening somewhere I couldn't see. He said, "When was this printed?" I said, 8 months after the original article. About 2.5 years ago. He said, "I was in Nebraska 2.5 years ago." I said, "I know you couldn't have seen it." He put the paper in his coat pocket. He picked up his coffee. He drank it standing up, looking out the broken window at the Wyoming plain. I waited. My students would be back from their noon recess in 20 minutes. He said, "My brother." I waited. He said, James was the night watchman. He was 19 years old. He worked at the Calhoun freight office to save money for land. He was killed in the robbery, and I was in the next county, but we had the same family name, and someone gave a description that was close enough, and I was taken in, and I couldn't prove where I was, and James was dead, so he couldn't say anything. He stopped. He drank more of the coffee. He said, "I got out eventually." The case fell apart. But by then, my name was in every paper from Dodge City to Denver, and I had been in the jail 3 months, and the ranch I had worked for had let me go, and there was nothing left in Kansas that was mine anymore. I said, "I'm sorry about your brother." He looked at me. Something in his face shifted, not opened, but slightly less closed than it had been. Like a door that has been locked for so long the hinges are stiff. He said, "I've been going by Cole because it's close enough to my name to feel like mine and different enough to buy me time. I didn't plan to run forever. I just couldn't find where to stop." I thought about this for a long moment, about what it costs a person to run from something for 3 years and then be told they didn't have to. Not relief, not immediately. Something more complicated than relief. The weight doesn't lift all at once. It sits there, and you have to learn to live without it the way you had learned to live with it. And that takes time, I said. Grover is a small town. If you decide to stay, people will ask your name. You'll have to decide which one to use, he said. That's a large if, I said. The notice is in your pocket. The case is closed. Henry Pruitt is serving his sentence in Leavenworth. You're a free man, Mr. Aldridge. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Why did you look for the follow-up article?" Most people would have stopped at the first one. I said, "I read everything. It's an occupational failing." He looked at me in a way he had not looked at me before. Not assessing, not calculating exits. Just looking. He said, "You rode 12 miles to the county seat." I said, I had school books to collect. He looked at the window frame he'd been working on. He said, "I should finish this." I said, "Yes." He went back to work. I went back to my desk. My students returned from recess, and the afternoon lessons proceeded, and Cole Aldridge finished the north window before 3 o'clock and packed his tools and left without saying anything more. And I sat at my desk after the children had gone and looked at the repaired window and thought about Nebraska and about a 19-year-old night watchman and about 4 lines on page 3 of a Kansas weekly. He did not come back the next day or the day after. I had expected this. What I had not fully expected was the specific quality of the 3 days that followed, the particular weight of having said the true thing to someone and not knowing what they did with it. I had given him information that changed the entire shape of his life, and I had no way to know whether he had received it as a gift or as a threat or as something he could not yet process at all. On the second day, I caught myself looking at the north window, the repaired one, where the new glass sat clean and solid in the frame, and thinking about a 19-year-old night watchman named James and about what it means to lose your brother and be blamed for the way he died. Not just accused, blamed. The specific cruelty of that was something I turned over carefully and set back down. On the third day, I wrote 2 letters I did not send. The first was to the Kansas County Clerk, confirming what I already knew, that the acquittal was a matter of public record and that Coleman Aldridge had no outstanding charges against him anywhere in the United States that I could find evidence of. The second letter I did not finish. It was addressed to Cole himself, and I was 3 sentences in before I understood that I was not writing information but something else entirely. And I folded it and put it in my satchel and did not think about it further. I had expected this. A man who has organized his whole life around not being found does not simply stop on a Tuesday afternoon because a school teacher in Wyoming hands him a piece of paper. He needed to think. I had given him something that changed the shape of everything he knew about his situation. And a person needs time to learn the new shape of a thing. On the 4th day, a Friday, he appeared at the schoolroom door after my students had left. He had his hat in both hands. He stood in the doorway and I waited. He said, "I've decided to stay on at the Hart Ranch through the winter if they'll have me." I said, "Will they?" He said, "I asked this morning." The foreman said yes. I said, "That's a good ranch," he said. "There's a fence section on the east perimeter that's going to give in the first hard freeze. I want to see it through," I said. "Fences are worth seeing through." He looked at his hat. He said, "There's a social at the Grange next Saturday. I'm told you attend." I said, "I do." "Yes," he said. "I've been told it's the kind of event where a man can ask a woman to dance without it being a significant thing." I said, "It is generally that kind of event, yes." He looked up from his hat. He said, "In that case, I'd like to ask you in advance if that's acceptable." I said, "It's acceptable." He put his hat on. He went back to the Hart Ranch. I sat at my desk with the November light coming through the new glass in the north window and thought about 3 years of carrying something that had already been lifted, and about the particular courage it takes to stop running when running is the only thing you've known how to do. The Grange social was on a Saturday in the second week of November, which in Wyoming Territory had a specific cultural gravity. The winters came hard and fast and long, and the social at the Grange in November was the last gathering of any size before the cold made everything harder to reach. People came from as far as 8 miles out, which on a Wyoming November night in a wagon meant a deliberate decision. The hall was full. I had been to 3 of these socials since arriving in Grover. The first I had attended as the new school teacher, which carried a social obligation of its own. The community had hired me and wanted to assess me, and I had been assessed and found acceptable. The second I had attended because it was expected. The third because I had run out of reasons not to, and because old Mr. Carson played the fiddle in a way that was genuinely good, and that I missed on the other 51 weekends of the year.